This is the review for test 4. Identify the following. Is it a function, yes or no? Remember, a function is a vertical line test. So if I were to draw a vertical line through any place on the graph, does it ever hit it more than once? And in this case, it doesn't, so that's a good thing. That means, yeah, it can't be in two places at once. So this works. Every spot on that graph only touches once. So yes, function. Domain. Remember, domain is our x values. So as I go across the graph, I'm going to go from left to right because it's x's and I want small to big. So I go from the left to the right. And the first thing that I notice over here is I have an arrow. That means it keeps going forever and ever. It doesn't just stop at -4 that I see right here. So the domain, it has an arrow, so it's going to keep going, and I'm on the left side of the graph. It's headed towards the negatives. We're talking about these x numbers. And it continues all the way over, so we're including all these numbers up until the number 4. So I can put a 4 here, and it stops at 4, and 4 is an open circle, which means do we actually equal 4? And it's no, because an open circle means the line gets closer to that number, but it doesn't actually get to that point. So 4 is not included. I put an open parentheses. From there, I'm going to do the range, and the range is the y values. So we're going to come from the bottom to the top because y numbers are going vertically. Y numbers go up and down, so bottom to top goes small to big. And in this one, it sure looks like we're at the number 1 as our lowest number. But look at this arrow that keeps going over here. If we extend that, which is important that we do that, we see that does it really stop at the number 1? No, we have an arrow over here that keeps going down into the negatives of the y numbers. So that arrow keeps going and going, so we get to include all those negative y's because it's going to go down there forever and ever. So we are going to have negative infinity because of that arrow. And then up at the very top, we do stop at the number 3. And here it's open, so we don't include it, but over here there is a solid line over here, so that does get to be included over here at this spot, which means that I am going to put a close bracket on the number 3. As for the maximum is the high spot on the graph, so the high spot on this graph is a 3. And the minimum, or the low place on the graph, well, if you remember the range, right? The low spot on the graph looked like a 1, but it's not because it has that arrow that keeps going. So there's not an actual place where there's a minimum because it goes to infinity. So for the minimum, we could say it's not defined. Increasing and decreasing. So as you go across the page, again, we read a page from left to right. And I'm going to get rid of this to help us figure that out. Okay, we read a graph from left to right. So as I come across from the left, as I come across this way, I read a book, that line is going up. And it keeps going up until I get to this number right here. So that section of the line is increasing until I get to -2. So Is it -4 to -2? Nope, because I have an arrow. So really, it's going to be negative infinity to -2 because it keeps going. And then next, if you look here, the next section of the graph is decreasing. It's going down, and right here is where it switches and it starts heading back up. So right here, I'm going down from -2 to the number 1. So from those two values, the graph is decreasing. So I'm going to list those numbers here, -2 to +1. And so from +1 to +4, the graph is increasing again. So for this, I'm going to list it back up here on the increasing. It increases from 1 to 4. On the next part, find f of 1. So the 1 is really our x value. That's our input. It's telling us this is really the same as if I said, okay, if x is 1, what is y? So if I go to x is 1 right here, and I look at where does it hit the graph on the number 1? Well, it hits the graph right here. So what point is that? That's 1, 1. So if I have an input of 1, my output is 1. That's our answer there. And for this other one, it's opposite. We don't know the input, but it says the output is 3. So if our output is 3, I'm going to go to the y number at 3. And if we look at this, here it doesn't count. So that's not an actual point. So I'm going to go to this one that is an actual point. So if the output is 3, I have this point right here. So if I were to name that point is -2, 3. Right here, -2, 3. So the input is -2 if I want an output of 3. Okay, the next graph. Again, function yes or no. If I draw a vertical line anywhere along that graph, do I ever hit more than once? Here, it kind of looks like that line went vertical, but keep in mind that, well, if we were to zoom in on that, you'd be able to see more clearly that it is still, increasing or slanted at this particular spot. So we're not going to worry about that, and then everywhere else it's just going to hit it once. So yes function. Domain is going across from the left to the right. So I'm going to come across here from the left all the way over to the right. So over here I got an arrow. It doesn't just stop at -4. It keeps going into the negative. So I'm going to have negative infinity to the number 4. And for this one, it's a solid line. There's no open circle there. So that one does get to be included with a equal bracket, box bracket. The range is from the bottom to the top. So if I come across around the bottom here to the top here, notice that this arrow only goes out to the side. It's not going up or down, so I don't need to worry about that. And so the smallest y value that I'll have is -1, and the largest y value that you have is 3. So you're saying everything in between, all of these y values are included. And there's a solid line there at -1, same with -3, so I'm going to do a box bracket, the equal bracket. The max is at 3, and the minimum is at -1. The high place on the graph is 3, the low place is -1. Increasing. Remember with increasing and decreasing, we only use the x numbers. So I'm going to come across the page from the left to the right. So as I come across, I notice that this piece right here, that is not increasing or decreasing, so I'm not even going to worry about it. Then the next place that we have right here, the line is headed down, and it's headed down from here all the way to here, not very far. And then if you notice that line starts going back up, and it keeps going up until we get to this turnaround point, and that's when it starts going back down. So that's my turnaround. So these are my important numbers right here. Okay, so we found here the line is curving down, -2 to -1, so I'm going to list that decreasing. Then the line is going up from -1 to 2, so that's my increasing. Oops, flip-flop. -1 to 2. And then the line is decreasing again from 2 to 4. So I list that 2 to 4. Decreasing. All right, find f of 2. Again, that's the same thing as saying that the x value is 2. So it's 2 comma what? So if I'm at the number x as 2, it's 2 comma what? What point is on that graph? That's the point 2 comma 3. So if my input is 2, my output is 3. And the second part, if f of x is -1, then we don't know what x is, but our output is -1, or the y value. So I'm going to go to the y, -1. So where do we hit the graph? At that y value. Right here. That's where it's touching the graph. And so that means this is the point, -1, -1. X is -1, y is -1. What does an open circle mean on a graph? It means that the solutions, or the line, we'll just say the line, gets closer and closer to that point, but never actually gets there. Never gets there. So that point's not included as a solution. Open circle on a graph. Given x such that 0 is less than x and x is less than or equal to 2, right, in interval notation. So we see here that all our x numbers are in between 0 and 2. So 0 and 2, all our numbers are in between there. That's our interval notation. We just put 0, 2. That means we're including everything in between. And if we equal the number, remember that's a box bracket, and if it's just going to be, if it's not equal to, right, we're going to do the parentheses. So that's our interval notation. Given -2 comma 4, we're going to write this in set notation. So we're going back to this one up here. So we're going to have x such that -2, I put x in between, and it's always less than. So x is less than the 4, but notice that the alligator really is eating the x. So x is bigger than that too. X is in between those two. And the or the positive 4 has a